While the documentary with Jeremy Corbell was being filmed, the FBI raided Bob Lazar's facility. They said they were searching for something specific. According to reports, they were supposedly looking for a piece of stable element 115, which Bob claimed to have. He allegedly took this element from a secret lab while he was working at a classified site known as S4. He said he managed to smuggle out a stable sample of it. There's even an old video from the 1980s, recorded by journalist George Knapp, showing Bob demonstrating how this mysterious material could bend light and do strange things. Not long after this FBI raid, element 115, also called moscovium, was officially synthesized by scientists in Russia using a particle accelerator. However, the version they created was extremely unstable and only existed for a tiny fraction of a second. It was enough to prove that the element exists, but it wasn't stable like the one Bob claimed to have seen or worked with. Bob Lazar has always said that the beings, he assumes extraterrestrials, who originally used this technology must have come from a completely different kind of environment, one where a stable version of element 115 could exist naturally. According to him, this element is a crucial part of how their spacecraft work. When exposed to radiation, it supposedly creates a powerful gravitational field, which would allow a spacecraft to move in ways that seem to defy our current understanding of physics, like moving faster than the speed of sound without making a sonic boom, or traveling through different mediums without slowing down. Bob also mentioned that he was shown a lot of strange things while working there, although he's careful about what he talks about. He doesn't like to say too much because he doesn't know whether some of it was real or deliberately planted to test him or discredit him. Privately, he has said he was shown a photo of an alien autopsy, an image of a being with only one organ inside its body. He was also told that the human genome had been altered, among other unbelievable things. But again, he's not sure what to believe. The entire experience was extremely strange. If Bob is lying, it's impressive how consistent and detailed his story has been for over 30 years. He talked about element 115 long before it was ever synthesized in a lab. That alone makes people wonder how he could have known about it. The fact that the government raided him while the documentary was being made adds to the suspicion that there's more to his story than just science fiction. According to Bob, his job at S4 involved working on the propulsion systems of these so-called flying saucers. He said the design of the craft he saw matched the classic disc-shaped UFOs people describe. Experts in aerospace have even said that the way he describes the propulsion system is surprisingly clever. Bob claimed that element 115 was used as the energy source. When placed in the craft's reactor, it would release antimatter, which then generated a gravitational field. This field was directed using 3 emitters, allowing the craft to move in any direction. Fast, smooth, and with abilities that defy normal physics. Even though these craft seem to operate outside of what we can currently build or replicate, the theories behind them are not necessarily beyond what science might one day understand. The big difference is that we don't yet have the technology or materials to do what Bob described. When Bob first started talking about element 115 in the late 1980s, it hadn't been discovered yet. Later on, scientists were able to briefly create it in a lab by smashing particles together, confirming its existence for just a split second. Bob had always said that if he was right, we would eventually be able to make a small but stable amount of it. That was his belief all along. Over time, more people have come to believe parts of Bob's story, especially that he really did work at a place like S4 near Area 51. Some parts of his account have been backed up by others or by circumstantial evidence. For example, he was friends with John Lear, another UFO enthusiast who often shared bizarre theories, some very far-fetched, like secret moon bases or devices that control human souls from the moon. Lear's ideas were all over the place, and he was known for spreading a mix of wild rumors and conspiracy theories. Interestingly, John Lear's father was Bill Lear, the inventor of the Learjet and a pioneer in aviation technology. This gave John some level of credibility, even though many thought he was more of a useful idiot, or maybe someone being manipulated. There's even a video where Lear admits he was given access to Bob Lazar's files and was told certain things by a high-ranking officer named Admiral McClellan. Lear claimed this admiral knew he talked a lot, so they allowed him to get involved, possibly as part of a controlled information leak. This idea, that certain information was allowed to get out in a limited way, is sometimes called a limited hangout. It's when authorities reveal just enough to mislead or distract from the full truth. Whether that's what happened with Bob Lazar or not is still debated. Bob Lazar once described a strange situation involving element 115. He claimed that the government had access to a stable form of this element, something not found naturally on Earth. Modern scientists were only able to create this element using a particle accelerator, and it lasted just a fraction of a second. But Bob said the government had a stable version, and it came from somewhere else, possibly from another planet. When asked where it came from, Bob explained that, according to documents he read, the origin was listed as the Zeta Reticuli star system, which is a binary star system. Whether that's true or not, he couldn't say for sure. It's just what the documents said. In the beginning, Bob thought the alien spacecraft he was working on belonged to the US government. But that changed when he finally walked inside one of them. What he saw convinced him it was not something humans had built. That moment completely shifted his understanding of what he was dealing with. The thing is, if you don't know Bob personally, his story can sound unbelievable. But imagine being him, experiencing something that dramatic and then returning to regular life, unsure whether to speak out or stay quiet. Carrying a secret like that would feel like a heavy burden, especially when you know people will probably think you're crazy if you ever talk about it. Most people do dismiss him quickly. They hear his story and assume he's making it all up. But then you have to ask, why would someone do that? What would they gain? According to Bob, his reason for speaking out was fear. He thought the government might silence him permanently because he knew too much. So he went public as a way to protect himself. For those unfamiliar with his story, here's a short version. Bob Lazar said he was hired to help reverse engineer alien spacecraft at a secret site called S4, near Area 51. Because this work was highly classified, he had to go through intense government security and monitoring. That meant all of his communications, including phone calls, were being watched. Eventually, the government found out that Bob's wife was having an affair. Instead of telling him, they quietly removed him from the project. They decided he was at risk of becoming emotionally unstable and therefore a security threat. From their perspective, it was a reasonable decision. However, Bob didn't understand why he was suddenly cut off and felt betrayed. Worried that something bad was going to happen to him, he started telling close friends what he had seen. He even took some of them out into the desert and showed them flying objects in the sky, right when and where he said they would appear. These were not regular aircraft. They appeared above a secret part of the base, not even widely known at the time. And it wasn't just once. He took people out 3 weekends in a row before they got caught. People often assume that Bob is just a believer in aliens or science fiction, but many who have investigated his claims have found small but consistent pieces of supporting evidence. The only really wild thing Bob has ever claimed seeing was what might have been an alien being. He said he once walked past a door with a small window and briefly looked inside. He saw something small sitting in a chair, with people standing around it. To this day, he doesn't know if it was a real being or maybe just a model or a dummy. He even says it could have been something the government built just to measure dimensions, like a size reference for a pilot seat. The craft he worked on had 3 seats, and Bob said they were clearly designed for beings much smaller than humans. The seats looked like they were made for children. This fits the common description of the little gray aliens people talk about, beings that are around 3 or 4 feet tall. Every time someone tries to disprove Bob's story, they run into the same problem. Too many things keep checking out. For example, recently a researcher tracked down the person who had done Bob's original security clearance for his work at the test site. That person confirmed that Bob had worked out there. Even after all these years, there are still people who were on site back then who say they remember seeing him. Even more fascinating is that Bob has never really been into UFO culture or alien stories himself. His main interest has always been the technology. He said that it bothers him every single night that he didn't get to stay involved with the project. He believes he could have learned more or helped more, but by going public, he essentially ended his own involvement. Bob Lazar's story first became widely known in 1989 when journalist George Knapp broke it. Before meeting Bob, George didn't give much thought to UFOs. He was a regular news reporter, focused on daily stories and not interested in aliens. But everything changed after meeting John Lear, who came into the newsroom one day with a stack of UFO documents. John's father was a well-known inventor. He created the Learjet and the 8-track tape. John had credibility because he had helped the station break the story about the F-117 stealth fighter. That gave him some trust when he said, "This UFO stuff is going to be the biggest story ever." While George's boss dismissed it, George was curious and decided to look into it. He eventually put John Lear on his small weekend news show. During that interview, John made big claims. Aliens were real, the government had recovered alien technology, and there was a huge cover-up. Some of it sounded wild, but some of it seemed worth investigating. When George met Bob Lazar later, things started to come together. Bob didn't seem like someone making it all up. He wasn't pushing a book or trying to get rich. He was just a man who claimed to have seen something extraordinary and couldn't stay silent about it. Over time, more and more details in Bob's story have been confirmed or partially verified, and that's why so many people still take him seriously today. The idea of working at the very edge of advanced technology is powerfully appealing. That's what drives Bob Lazar's interest. He says he doesn't really care whether aliens exist or where they might come from. What matters to him is the technology, how these craft work, how their power systems function, and what that might mean for science. Because he's focused on the machinery, he doesn't spend much time listening to UFO stories just for entertainment. He leaves the bigger picture, the history, connections, and background threads, to people like journalist George Knapp, who has spent decades pulling pieces together. George recently told me that he either found documentation or spoke with people who had first-hand knowledge, indicating that the secret project Bob worked on is something the government seems to take out of storage every 8 to 10 years. They revisit it, see whether modern materials science or engineering has advanced enough to make progress, then put it back if they still can't crack it. That pattern shows up in a document that has become a huge topic in UFO circles, the so-called Wilson Memo. The Wilson Memo refers to a conversation said to have taken place between Admiral Thomas Wilson, a senior U.S. military officer at the time, and a scientist who has appeared in one of Jeremy Corbell's films. People have argued for years over whether the memo is authentic. According to the speaker here, it is real. The conversation happened, the document reflects that conversation, and this is the first time he's being this direct about it. If you look it up online under Wilson Memo, you'll find the document people are debating. As remembered, the memo dates to 2001 but describes earlier events, including a meeting at EG&G Special Projects in 1989. EG&G was a well-known defense contractor that handled sensitive government work. The memo describes how a deeply classified special access program, something beyond normal top-secret clearance, ran into trouble. Progress stalled, the technology was shelved, and later revisited to see if science had caught up. That start, stop, revisit cycle echoes what George Knapp heard from his sources about Lazar's program. One part of the Wilson Memo that really stands out, and that many people see as supporting Bob Lazar's claims, involves the role of private industry. In the memo, the Admiral says he learned about a deeply hidden program, SAP, Special Access Program, and tried to get access, believing that as a high-ranking official he had the authority to review it. But the private contractor running the program denied him access. That's extraordinary if true. It suggests that some of the most sensitive technology may be controlled within industry compartments that can refuse even very senior government officials unless they have the exact need to know. Supporters of Bob argue that something similar happened to him on a personal level. They say elements within the system were prepared to discredit him if he ever spoke out. They could erase or block academic records. People point to confusion around his reported time at MIT, smear his reputation by linking him to embarrassing incidents. A legal case involving a brothel has often been used to ridicule him, and paint him as an eccentric backyard experimenter. He once mounted a jet engine on a Honda, who lucked into contact with top physicist Edward Teller. All of this would give authorities plausible deniability, meaning they could say, "Look, this guy's unreliable. Don't believe him. even if parts of what he said were true. There's a line in the Oppenheimer film where General Leslie Groves says he didn't hire Oppenheimer in spite of his controversial political connections. He hired him because of them, implying that vulnerabilities can become leverage. In ultra-secret programs, having something compromising on a person can make them easier to control. Some think that kind of thinking applied to Bob Lazar. Recruit someone brilliant but personally complicated, then keep them on a short leash. You also have to look at who Bob was connected to before he ever claimed to work at S4. He knew John Lear, an outspoken UFO personality who talked publicly about alien bases and all kinds of extreme ideas. If you were running a highly classified program and one of your engineers was friends with a loud UFO guy, that would show up in a background investigation. Intelligence agencies, CIA included, have long had an interest in unusual aerospace topics, so nothing about those connections would be ignored. Lear himself flew government-linked aircraft and had claimed CIA ties. The timing of his supposed break with them has been debated. Critics ask, if Lear was really spilling secrets, why wasn't he cut off sooner? What was going on behind the scenes? Here's how George Knapp became involved. After airing a couple of TV segments with John Lear, who hinted that he knew someone working with alien technology at Area 51,